Welcome to the Design30 podcast, where I provide design strategies and tools to improve creativity, innovation, and overall design confidence. Today, we will be discussing a method or a tip or a trick. Well, essentially, it's something that's going to help improve your efficiency and reduce errors, either at work or if you run your own business, maybe you work from home, wherever you may be. It's simple, it's easy to do, but it's also something that you'll probably lose track of, and it's really easy to not even think about it and make the mistake without any forethought. So it's something just to keep in mind, and I think it will help you out quite a bit, and no matter what field of work you're in. But before we dive into that, I want to mention, as always, please rate the podcast and subscribe to the Design30 YouTube channel. You can also follow Design30 on Instagram and Twitter. The handle is @LearnDesign30. And then finally, don't forget, you can always subscribe to the Design30 Substack for free. So I'm a little bit under the weather for this episode today. So hopefully I can keep this episode a bit shorter and keep my train of thought throughout the whole thing, even though I'm slightly feverish at the time, and there is also a pretty good windstorm going on outside. So if you hear anything in the background, that's just my house getting blown to pieces by the wind. So don't worry about it. Okay, so today's topic is duplication of information, and might sound pretty straightforward, but what this is placing information in more than one spot. And this information can be, best practices at work. It could be a standard operating procedure, potentially onboarding documentation, anything like that. I mean, any of us who have worked at a company, any of you who have worked at a company know that there's always directions to set up your email and to how to submit expense reports or how to get reimbursed for work trips, things like that. And all this documentation, it builds up over time, and it all comes along with the job. We all have to experience it. It's all very necessary things. But it necessitates that information is saved in a lot of different places. It can be saved in different formats and different folders, different servers, who knows? So that's all information you have to keep track of. And you might be asking yourself, well, what's the problem with duplicating this information? Maybe that's actually a good thing if you have the information in more than one place. Well, as you will come to find throughout this episode, that is probably not a great idea. The problem with duplication is it takes a lot of time. Time's the real problem with duplication. And over time, things need to be updated. And if you have to update some important bit of information, you need to know where all it's saved at. So if you have it saved in multiple different locations, in multiple different formats and folders, that's a lot of things to go back and update, and it can lead to a lot of disorganization. It takes a lot of time to do all that updating, and most importantly, it's just hard to remember where all of it is at and where to go actually input the right information. So at the end of the day, you could have information that's contradictory. Some people are reading one document, other people are reading another document. I'm sure a lot of you have ran into that problem. Even with yourself, you read one document, then you read another one, and you're like, I don't know which one of these documents is the correct one. Which one am I supposed to follow? So duplicating information can lead to a lot of big problems at work, in your own business. Maybe you're running your own business and you're writing standard operating procedures for your workers. All of these different scenarios. And I know this sounds very simple. It also might sound obvious, but if you pay attention at work to all the different places you have to input information Like, pay attention to how many times you have to put in the same information in multiple different places. And then think about that when you're creating a new document, or maybe you just learned, I don't know, some new trick for logging into your email on a specific web browser. Where all are you going to save that information? Are you going to save it on your local network? Are you going to save it in Microsoft Teams? Are you just going to save it on your desktop and shoot it out via email? There's a lot of different ways to disseminate that information. And then you have to think about, okay, well, now I've already sent it out, or I've saved it in all these different locations, and perhaps something changes and you realize, oh shoot, I misspelled a word, or I put the wrong login information on this. Now you have to go back and update all of those different things, all those different files, remember where they're all at, send another email to update people. And it really adds up over time. It decreases your efficiency. It makes your company want to change less frequently. So you might actually not be improving as fast as you could be, because it takes so much time to change what might be bad documentation, but it's documented in so many different places. Nobody has time to go and update all those different things. So overall, it can turn into a real drain on your company and for you personally in just your job. I mean, you want to be working on new things that are value adds to your company, and updating documentation or correcting wrong information is not where you want to spend your time, most likely. So how do you prevent this? Well, it's pretty obvious, perhaps, that you just need, whenever possible, to have a single source of truth. That's one document where you can trust the information that's in it, and whenever something changes, you go back to that one document, you update it, you control it with a revision or something like that. And so you know that this is the one spot you come back to when you need to update it. It's a place you can go when you want to know what's the current standard, what's the current operating procedure that everyone else would be following. It's that one single source of truth. You want to avoid creating multiple documents with the same information that are controlled and require updates. And what I mean by controlled is that if the information in that document changes, you have to go back and update it. It's part of your procedures to update it. So you want to avoid having too many of those types of documents, because again, that means whenever you do make a change, you have to go back and address all of those different documents. You want to try to consolidate information, that is, and you want to consolidate processes and directions whenever possible. Try to limit the amount of documentation that you have that you need to be responsible for and control and update over time. So a few examples of this. The first one, if you think of a new product, you're probably going to have a user guide. You could have a quick start guide. Perhaps you have a frequently asked question section. And in that section, you have getting started. And then you also created a video that you send out to everyone who buys the product. And that tells them essentially the same thing. How do you get started with this product? And then let's say all of that's sent out, published, ready to go, and something with your product changes. Right before you're about to ship your first release of products, some little, the color of something changes, or a function of one of the buttons changes. I don't know, something simple, could be major, but probably most likely if you're working in product development or a manufacturing company, you're going to have just little things that change all the time. So now you have to go back and update all of those documents. You have to update your user guide and your quick start guide and potentially even create a new video. So what's a way to avoid all of this? Well, one example could be try to not have a separate user guide and a separate quick start guide. Maybe you can combine those. Maybe part of your user guide is your quick start guide. And so when you need to change a bit of information, you go back and just update that one document. And then think about with your video, try to make it a little bit more general so that if small things do change, you don't have to go back and reshoot an entire video or pay some videographer to come in and create a new video for you. So just being a little bit more thoughtful and strategic with what goes into your getting started videos or your user guides and your quick start guides, and trying to reduce the amount of information. And perhaps your frequently asked questions section on getting started could be a simple copy and paste from your user guide, which is now combined with your quick start guide. So that's one example of how you can consolidate some of this documentation to reduce a lot of the work that's going to eventually have to happen when something with your product changes, something with one of your procedures changes, anything along those lines. Changes are going to happen. You need to plan and prepare for them. And on a personal note, I recently was a part of a new product release. And as a part of that, I created a few different documents for a couple departments in the company, just trying to explain what the product was and the relevance to those departments, and essentially communicate the information I thought would be most useful to them. What I didn't think through was, okay, what am I going to do with those documents when things change? Which they inevitably did. And this last week, we had quite a few changes on this product. And I was asked about these documents. Like, well, are these documents up to date? Can we trust the information that's in them? Where are you going to save those long term? And I quickly realized that what I was trying to do was help out other people in other departments, be helpful, and just give people information I thought they needed. But what I really did was create all these different documents that have information that could potentially change. And if they're not tightly controlled and updated whenever something changes with the product, there's going to be a bunch of wrong misinformation out there from each of these documents. Because let's say I remember to update one of them, but not the other, and now there's contradictory information. One department has one set of information about this product, another department has another set of information, and pretty soon you could see how this will cause a lot of headaches, a lot of confusion, and a lot of errors in your company, in your product. And it's also going to cause a lot of confusion for your customers if they're getting different information from different documents you've published or from different people that they talk to at your company. So in this case, I was trying to be helpful and thoughtful, but I didn't think it through to essentially what would happen at the end. I didn't think it all the way through the process. How was I going to control these documents, and how were they going to continue to be useful over the life of the product, essentially? Now, let's get into the Design30 discipline. And this will be just a few takeaways from this episode that I think you should obviously keep in mind throughout your week and try to implement in your own work as much as possible. The first one is, do not have multiple sources of truth. Like I said, you want that one source of truth. That's the ideal, the gold standard. It's not possible in every situation, but if you think through when you're creating new documents, is it possible to limit the amount of documents and consolidate them into one source of truth? That is the most optimal solution, although it's not always possible or practical. So do not have multiple sources of truth. You want to limit, whenever possible, the amount of documents you have that you must update. So these are often called control documents, and they have a revision associated with them. You want to limit the amount of those so you don't have to go through a whole revision process and update all of these different control documents. And try to consolidate as much as possible. Like I mentioned in the how-to or the quick start guide example, sometimes you can actually combine multiple documents into one, and then you can release parts separately or reference parts separately, but all the information is contained within one document. So the overall lesson in the Design30 discipline for this week, do not duplicate information without strategy and forethought. And that will do it for this episode. I hope this tip on not duplicating information proves to be useful. It helps make your work and your life more efficient and reduce errors. And with that, I will bring this episode to a close. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, design more, despair less.